I've been married for 3 years, living with my husband and our adorable kitten, Milo. My mother-in-law firmly believes that academic achievements define a person's worth. She never misses an opportunity to boast about the fact that her son graduated from a prestigious university. We reside in the countryside, where the only convenience store is a small local shop, and our close-knit community means frequent interactions with our neighbors. My mother-in-law takes every chance to brag during conversations, proudly declaring, "A man like my son is out of reach unless you have an impressive academic background." The first time I met her, during a formal introduction between our families, she wasted no time asking, "Which university did you graduate from?" "The University of Arizona," I answered. Her expression immediately shifted, betraying her disappointment. She clearly had no regard for my alma mater and likely assumed it was an insignificant institution. From that moment, I sensed she saw me as someone unworthy of her son due to my supposedly inferior education. Despite approving our marriage, she began treating me poorly in everyday interactions. Whenever my husband and father-in-law weren't around, she would make cruel remarks. "How did Kay end up with someone as uneducated as you? You can't hold a candle to my brilliant son. Did you trap him into marriage with an accidental pregnancy? A child deserves a better mother than you. Perhaps it's best if no child is born at all." Every time we were alone, she repeated these hurtful words. Though we didn't live together, she found every opportunity to criticize my educational background. Seeing me upset seemed to bring her satisfaction, and the stress began to take its toll. Even my hair started turning gray. She didn't stop there. Soon, she spread her disdain throughout the neighborhood. "Linda can barely do simple math or recite the alphabet properly," she would say, painting an embarrassing image of me. Because of this, I often found myself excluded from community gatherings. I thought about leaving many times, but if I did, I knew she would twist the story and spread rumors about how I had abandoned my responsibilities. So, I endured in silence, unwilling to give her more ammunition. Then came a turning point. My in-laws decided to renovate their home to accommodate my father-in-law, who had developed health issues. Since my husband and I took full responsibility for his care, we also ended up covering the renovation costs. To celebrate, my mother-in-law organized a grand gathering, inviting all the neighbors. Naturally, she assigned me to handle all the preparations. "I'll help," my husband offered. But before he could, my mother-in-law grabbed his hand and pulled him away. "Kiri, come with me. I want to introduce my highly educated son to everyone," she insisted. Then, turning to me, she sneered, "With your lack of education, the only thing you're good for is cooking, so, get to work." And with that, she left. At the gathering, she was in her element, basking in admiration as she boasted, "My son even built this house. He's truly remarkable, such a gifted man. And, of course, who raised him? Me, aha." Encouraged by her audience, she continued her tirade. Meanwhile, my daughter-in-law contributes nothing but still expects to take over this house. She won't even give me a grandchild. What a terrible woman. Then, with a sly glance in my direction, she added, "An uneducated daughter-in-law is such a burden. Who knows what kind of children she'd have? She's probably scheming to inherit everything. I wouldn't be surprised if she tampered with today's food. Maybe we should all be careful about what we eat." Of course, I had done no such thing, and yet she still took a bite of my food, proving that deep down, she didn't believe her own words. She muttered under her breath, just loud enough for me to hear, "Not that it matters. Any child of hers would inherit her low intelligence anyway." Her relentless cruelty, always delivered when others weren't paying attention, was what infuriated me the most. The neighbors, entertained by her remarks, chuckled and nodded in agreement. I shot a glance at them, and some awkwardly averted their eyes. If they felt guilty, why were they siding with her? Did she hold some kind of power over them? As I stood there, lost in thought, my mother-in-law's taunts continued. How long would I have to endure this? Would I spend the rest of my life being bullied by this woman? For what? And then, something inside me snapped. Enough. I had had enough. Without warning, I raised my voice. That's it. My sudden outburst startled not just my mother-in-law but also little Milo, who flinched at the sound. "I'm sorry for scaring you, Milo," I said softly. "I'll give you a treat later." Then, I turned back to my mother-in-law and met her gaze. "You don't like me, do you?" I asked. "You think I'm unworthy because of my education. You don't even want me to have children, right? Who knows what would happen if I did? Would they be abandoned in the mountains? Oh, how terrifying." "What? I would never do such a thing," she protested. And about the money we spent on this house, I continued. You will repay me, every single penny. That wiped the smug look off her face. What nonsense is this? She shrieked. Her loud voice drew the attention of my husband and father-in-law, who rushed over to see what was happening. The neighbors also turned to watch. She wasted no time twisting the narrative. Listen to this. This woman is demanding repayment for the house when she contributed nothing. All eyes were on me. But mother-in-law, I said calmly, didn't you say you don't want a child from me? That's right, she snapped. I turned to the neighbors. She's told you this before, hasn't she? There was a brief, uncomfortable silence before one of them hesitantly admitted. Well, yes, she said. Another neighbor nodded. She always says things like that. My mother-in-law's face drained of color. She had never expected them to expose her like this. How pathetic. She must have thought she had complete control, that she could degrade me endlessly without consequence. But I was done staying silent. I wasn't some stress relief punching bag for her amusement. I had finally fought back. I turned to my mother-in-law, my voice laced with frustration. How could you say something so cruel about me? My husband and father-in-law, now fully aware of the truth, were visibly shocked. Are you serious? You've been bullying Linda all this time? My father-in-law demanded, his face turning red with anger as he stepped toward my mother-in-law. Caught off guard by his unexpected fury, she tried to defend herself. I'm just being honest. It's not wrong to say that a child from someone as uneducated as Linda wouldn't amount to much. Besides, she's nothing more than a stay-at-home wife living off our son. Who does she think she is? She shouted, her voice trembling with frustration. But as she caught sight of the cold stares from both my husband and father-in-law, her confidence wavered, and her face turned pale. She had always maintained a sweet and respectable image in front of them, never showing the cruel side I had endured. But now, her mask had slipped. My husband's voice was ice-cold as he turned to her. Mom, do you even know what you're talking about? Linda graduated from Harvard. She's far more accomplished than I am. The room fell into stunned silence. My mother-in-law blinked in disbelief. What? That's impossible, she stammered, shaking her head desperately, clinging to her assumptions. No, she told me before we got married that she went to some no-name university. The truth was, I had graduated from Harvard. The unknown university she misheard was actually Cambridge, one of the most prestigious institutions in the world. After finishing my undergraduate degree, I pursued my master's in the UK. When my mother-in-law asked about my education, I answered truthfully, never imagining she would completely misinterpret it and hold it against me so viciously. If she truly valued higher education as much as she claimed, she should have known about Cambridge, but because of her misunderstanding, she tormented me relentlessly, and yet, I had no intention of correcting her. Why should I? Her behavior had already made it clear what kind of person she was. I had long since decided that maintaining a relationship with her wasn't worth it. Besides, I never believed a person's worth was determined by their education. My parents never attended college, yet they are the people I respect most in this world. That's why I never flaunted my academic background. I didn't think it mattered. But perhaps, in this case, revealing the truth had its advantages. My husband, now furious, turned back to his mother. And let's get something straight, this house? Linda paid for it. She contributed $100,000 from her savings. My mother-in-law gasped. What? That's impossible. A housewife like her couldn't have that kind of money, she scoffed. My husband let out a sharp laugh. Linda isn't just a housewife. She earns several times more than I do. What? My mother-in-law's face twisted in disbelief. Yes, she's a stock trader. Her monthly profits alone are over $110,000. Her jaw dropped. It made sense. She had no way of knowing. Every time she called or dropped by unexpectedly, I was always at home, so she simply assumed I did nothing. In reality, I had deliberately kept my income a secret from her. Just as she was obsessed with academic status, she also had a greedy obsession with money. If she had known about my earnings, she would have pestered me for expensive gifts, luxury items, and who knows what else. That's why my husband and I agreed to keep it from her. Now, faced with the truth, my mother-in-law was left speechless. For those wondering why I contributed to the renovation of her house despite despising her, there was a reason. It was a calculated move. I wanted to make sure she had no excuse to live with us in the future. By providing her with a comfortable, accessible home, she wouldn't need to rely on us, even if her health declined. It was a small price to pay for long-term peace of mind. But now, after everything she had done, I could no longer see her as just a nuisance. She was an enemy. I looked her straight in the eye and said, "Regardless, you'll be paying back every last cent of that $100,000. If you can't, sell the house and the land. If that's not an option, take out a loan." Panic flashed across her face. "You can't be serious. This house is ours." "I won't give her a single penny," she shrieked. But my father-in-law, who had remained quiet until now, finally exploded. "How much more damage do you want to cause, woman?" he roared. "Look around you, no one here is on your side anymore." My mother-in-law flinched as if she had been struck. Her pride was immense, but for the first time, she was completely cornered. Even as my father-in-law apologized on her behalf, she refused to meet my eyes. She simply turned on her heel and stormed out, humiliated. When she was gone, my father-in-law sighed and looked at me. "Linda, I'm so sorry. I should have noticed sooner." "There's no need for you to apologize," I reassured him, placing a hand on his shoulder. "She only bullies me when you're not around. You've done nothing wrong, just, please continue treating me like family." His eyes softened. "Of course, Linda. From now on, I'll make sure she never troubles you again." And with that, he followed after her. The neighbors who once entertained my mother-in-law's words now came forward to apologize. Many even declared they were cutting ties with her altogether. For the first time in a long while, I felt truly at peace. 1 month later, my father-in-law announced he was divorcing her. As it turned out, her toxic behavior wasn't the only issue. She had also been having an affair with a middle-aged man who, ironically, had the academic background she always idolized. My father-in-law had suspected something was off and hired a private investigator. The evidence was undeniable. Their divorce was finalized swiftly. As part of the settlement, my mother-in-law was ordered to pay back the $100,000 I contributed to the house, and who ended up covering the cost? Her affair partner. Now, she was living as a housekeeper for him. When my father-in-law told us the news, he looked relieved. And as for me, I was now 5 months pregnant. My husband, father-in-law, and even the neighbors who once turned their backs on me were now offering their support. For the first time, I felt truly at ease. Ironically, I had a strange sense of gratitude toward my mother-in-law. After all, if not for her, I might not have realized who my real allies were. Looking ahead, I was ready to embrace a happy life with my husband, our soon-to-be-born child, my father-in-law, and, of course, our beloved cat Milo.